Good evening to you tonight. I'm Marnie Hughes. Leland Vittert is joining us live in Uvalde, Texas this evening. A community still mourning the loss of 19 children and 2 of its teachers following yesterday's massacre. We have new images tonight emerging from the shooter's social media posts. Texas Governor Greg Abbott saying Salvador Ramos posted 3 times on Facebook as he carried out his rampage. Facebook now saying those were private messages. They were not public posts. The shooter also sent a series of chilling messages to a 15-year-old girl he met online weeks before. The messages read, "I just shot my grandma in her head." And then he wrote, "I am going to shoot up an elementary school now." The Texas Department of Public Safety says a school resource officer was the first to encounter Ramos on campus but did not engage him. The shooter then entered Robb Elementary School, followed shortly after by local police officers. Ramos then shot at the 2 officers before barricading himself into a 4th grade classroom with a backpack full of ammunition and an AR-15 assault rifle. Tonight, we know 19 children are dead and 2 of their teachers. The FBI revealing that the suspect had legally purchased those two rifles earlier this month, shortly after his 18th birthday. And Leland, we are also learning so much more tonight about the lives lost in that small town of Uvalde.
Yeah, we are, Barney, and it's so easy right now to always focus on the evil part of this story. And there's a lot of questions to be answered about this shooter, what motivated him, how he was allowed to do this, and the like. We'll try to balance that by remembering the victims, now 19 4th graders, some of whom we will have heard had been given awards earlier in the day for perfect attendance at school, and now they will never attend school again, as Governor Abbott pointed out. We'll talk about the investigation in terms of exactly what happened, the timeline, the red flags that were perhaps missed, and then well and deservedly are being called heroes tonight for their push in to this school and taking the shooter down. I want to bring in my colleague Brian Enton here. We always hear in the aftermath of this the red flags that were missed. Is there anything, reasonably speaking, in Salvatore Ramos's background that is easy to point out was clearly missed?
Look, I think it's possible. I think it's too soon to tell. The fact that he had the guns and that he was clearly, from what I've been able to figure out, mentally unstable. How did he get the guns? Did his family really not know that he had those guns? His grandparents who he lived with, his grandpa said today, we had no idea he had these weapons. Is that really true? That's something obviously the FBI is looking into right now.
Yeah, and I know when you were out near the family's home, you spoke to one of the neighbors. Take a listen.
He was just mad at the world.
Mad at the world?
Yeah, like they wouldn't accept him, the way he was, the way, his conversations with the lips that he had and the way he dressed, they wouldn't make fun of him. So.
What do you mean by the lips?
He couldn't talk.
Lisp. I'm sorry. He had a lisp.
Yeah.
How or why, if we know, did he go from having a lisp and being bullied and these other issues to shooting his grandmother and then coming here and killing 19 kids?
I think that's been the #1 question and comment that I've seen on Twitter today is people saying, look, I was bullied. I mean, I put that video out and people said, we're all bullied.
Right.
That doesn't give you an excuse to do this. But the neighbor who's very close to the family said that he was, not in a good mental frame of mind, that he was bullied by his peers, other teenagers, that he had this lisp, that he even went as far as to cut his face. He had scars on his face. He was, doing self-harm, that kind of thing. So the neighbors were not terribly surprised. They were surprised this happened, but they weren't surprised.
Shocked that it happened, not necessarily surprised in retrospect that it was him.
Correct.
These are some of the text messages that I know that you had worked on authenticating. During the fight with his grandmother, first saying on Facebook in private messages, I'm going to do something to my grandmother, then saying that I did do something with my grandmother. Now I'm going to go shoot up an elementary school. These are just in the couple of minutes before a shooting. We have no reason to believe that anybody in law enforcement even saw these.
No. And the governor was very clear today that the first signs that they had that something could happen was 30 minutes before the incident with those 3 messages on Facebook. He said there were no tips or information given to law enforcement. He had no criminal history that they know of, and they had no red flags about his mental health.
Yeah, and you think about for that family now in this close-knit community and sort of what they're dealing with. You've got a mother whose son is dead, the shooter. She's also at the bedside of her mother, the grandmother who was shot by the son. That's sort of awful and incomprehensible at one side. The other side of this is the families that are all around us. I know you've been here talking to so many of them. What struck me in Uvalde is this shared sense of grief and lack of understanding. Just 2 doors down from where we are is a grandfather who heard the gunshots and looked at the school, saw the SWAT teams going in, heard the shootout. His granddaughter, 4th grade, was in there and survived. His daughter-in-law's younger sister died. And how this town reconciles that, it seems to still be an open question.
Yeah, and it's a small town. I mean, almost everyone here knows someone connected to the school. For example, where the shooter lived with his grandparents, just a few houses down, the principal for this school lives there. They all know each other. And I think, all of these shootings are awful, but there's something especially terrible here when you really try to take in the fact that 19 4th graders, very little kids, were murdered in a classroom right in this building right here.
Yeah, the human mind really isn't built to comprehend those things in how profoundly awful they are. Brian, keep up the great reporting. I know you're going to keep at it tomorrow as well, and we're going to try to get a little bit more of the stories about the victims here, which really needs to be told. The other story that needs to be told is what happened once the gunfire began. And that is the Texas State Troopers, the sheriff's deputies, the Border Patrol agents who all answered the call to arms quite literally and came. Governor Abbott talked about them earlier today.
Law enforcement officials did what they do. They showed amazing courage by running toward gunfire for the singular purpose of trying to save lives.
Ran towards gunfire, and a number of them knew that the students in this school were either their children or certainly their friends and fellow law enforcement officers' children. Lieutenant Chris Oliveris, Texas Department of Public Safety, with us. It is the Texas Rangers who are leading this investigation. We have the initial shots fired at the home when he tried to kill his grandmother. How long from then until he was dead inside the school?
Right. So, Leland, we're trying to establish a timeline from the time the actual event took place with the grandmother, when the grandmother was shot, to the point where he actually made entry into the school, and also to the point where the suspect was killed. So, again, we're working with the Rangers, FBI, trying to put that timeline in place. We want to provide accurate information. We're trying to gather the facts. We're preliminary investigation. We can estimate anywhere from 40 minutes to an hour, but that's in combination of all these events that took place. So again, we want to gather more facts and provide accurate information as far as an accurate timeline.
In these moments, seconds stretch into hours, and that's just how the human mind comprehends that. So the eyewitness report saying there were officers waiting outside to go in and the like. What do we know about the school resource officer? Did he fire his weapon at this guy armed with 2 rifles?
Right. So initial reports that we gathered was that there was some type of gunfire exchange between.
There was video of gunfire being exchanged.
So that was the initial report between that school resource officer who was first on scene with the shooter. What we do know right now, though, is that we do not know exactly as far as if this school resource officer was off his vehicle, if he was responding in his vehicle, what the distance was between him and the shooter. So we're trying to corroborate that information. As we speak right now, the Texas Rangers are talking to that school resource officer, so we should be able to have more accurate information in the days coming.
It is always in these situations, and we always have to remember, the initial reports are not mostly wrong. They're almost entirely completely wrong. Right. We all thought for at least a couple of hours that this was a car chase involving Border Patrol, which is not uncommon here. In fact, one of the people we interviewed earlier said that they didn't think much of hearing gunshots in a car chase because it was so common here, since we're so close to the border with the smuggling operations. Talk to me about the difference for your troopers, for the sheriff's deputies, for others that you've been involved with, of responding to a school shooting in a big city versus responding to a school shooting where either their kids or their fellow officers' kids go to school.
So one thing to point out here, especially in Uvalde, it's a small community, but the majority of this community, everyone knows each other. Yeah. Law enforcement, Border Patrol agents, deputies have kids in that school. Actually, there was a deputy that actually lost his daughter in that school. So there's a lot of Border Patrol agents in this area. As you mentioned, it's a border town. Also state troopers that work in this area. So multiple agencies that are in this area that are able to respond to a situation as what took place here in Uvalde. So a lot of resources that were in place, but of course a lot of questions that are unanswered too as well. Trying to establish a timeline, trying to establish what were the security measures at this school, how was this gunman able to make entry into the school, and also how long was he in that school, how long was the shooting taking place. So again, trying to gather all those facts, trying to gather surveillance video as well, and talking to witnesses.
One thing that I won't ask you to authenticate, but you can speak to it, is the picture of the Border Patrol agent. He was a tactical officer who ran into the school and ended up being the one to shoot and kill the suspect. He took a round through his hat, and we have a picture of the hat that shows you another couple of millimeters he would have been killed. That bullet would have gone through his brain. It also shows you that for whatever reason, he didn't take the time to gear up and put on his tactical gear that he would have had in his car. What are you all hearing in terms of those moments of people running in? How did that get organized? What happened?
So we know initially there were several officers, local officers here from Uvalde, that tried to make entry prior to that tactical team arriving. They were met with gunfire. 2 officers were shot. They were unable to make entry into the school, and that's when the gunman barricaded himself inside the classroom. Moments later, that's when that off-duty tactical officer arrived from Border Patrol, along with a deputy, other tactical officers as well, and also local police officers. They're able to form a formation and actually make a forcible entry into that classroom, in which they were met with gunfire as well. And as you just showed earlier, how that off-duty was just nearly shot in the head by the suspect. But at that point, they were able to return fire. They shot the suspect, and the suspect was deceased on scene.
As you all are on this investigation right now, we can go back and forth, and it will go for a long time, about whether or not there were red flags that were missed in the community about a clearly troubled young troubled, they don't resort to this level of violence. Is there anything that you all are investigating that says that there was someone else in the community who either knew or should have known that he was really dangerous?
And that's what's shocking to us with this particular incident, because this individual that had no criminal history, was not affiliated with any gangs. We had not been able to identify any friends, a girlfriend. We do know that he was a high school dropout, unemployed, living with his grandparents. So a lot of unanswered questions. But one key to this investigation is going to be the grandmother. Right now, she is critical. We're hoping that she does pull through, because she will be a key witness to provide more information as to the history of their grandson, as far as, was there any red flags? Was there any indicators as far as what took place, and how maybe this could have been prevented by identifying those indicators?
Look forward for us. So far, we're coming up on graduations. Right. Graduation times, obviously here, this is a different scenario, but around Texas, is there any reason that you all have to believe to increase security at schools around Texas? Is there a change sort of in your force posture?
So we're on high alert right now. We're looking at every potential threat, especially working with our intel partners, working with FBI, monitoring social media platforms to see if there's any other individuals that may want to copycat this particular shooter. So we're on high alert, especially with the end of the school year. So we are taking an aggressive stance and as far as enforcement around our schools, especially here in the state of Texas.
All right. In terms of the weapons itself, and there's going to be a lot made out of this, on or near his 18th birthday, which was in the past couple of weeks, the suspect, I will avoid saying his name when I can, bought 2 AR-15s, 325 rounds of ammunition, a tactical vest, bought locally. Any reason to believe that there was something that is either suspicious about the purchase or that there was something illegal in that nature?
Right. So obviously he did purchase the weapons legally. Again, he had no criminal history, no type of indicators as far as that would keep him from purchasing the weapons. But again, working with ATF, that could be some type of indicators as far as suspicious activity, purchasing 2 rifles within days, also the amount of ammunition. So again, ATF is looking at that. They're trying to identify exactly when these weapons are purchased, how they were purchased, also anything else behind it. Was there anybody else involved as far as this particular shooter? So working closely with them so they can identify that.
It's reasonable to believe that we have spent more time talking now than the agents spent in the Rangers and everybody else who stormed into the building spent from the time they ran in to the time that they shot and killed the suspect. Do we have any understanding yet of sort of what organized them? Was it just a bunch of guys saying, let's go and let's roll? Or was there some kind of command and control put together in those few minutes?
You know, at a situation like that, active shooter situation, there's no time to coordinate. You have to go in there and address the threat. You have to go in there and stop the threat. That's the whole purpose behind an active shooter situation. So that's why we know there was multiple agencies involved. And also not only that, but also those that were trying to evacuate children and teachers by breaking windows around the school, trying to evacuate and prevent any further loss of life.
Yes. So much was learned from Columbine. Those lessons have been applied all the way out. All right, we'll look forward to new information tomorrow. Really always appreciate you being here, sir. Thank you. It's good to see you. Under better circumstances next time. All right. Lieutenant Chris Oliveros of the Texas Department of Public Safety. More from him tomorrow night. When we come back, the state senator who represents this district, it has already become a political issue here of how to prevent something like this in the future, if preventing it was even possible. That when we come back.
Thanks for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.